as we continue on here in 2023, it's an honor to bring in a cat, a guy who has been a prodigious writer for some time over all sorts of different mediums and different types of topics and subjects, prolifically writing for a magazine that, as far as I can remember from the time I was born, it was in my grandparents' house on the Lower West Side, the New Yorker. And it was funny because a few weeks ago I had a chance to partake in this podcast called Guess the Year, and it was really a divine time. It was the opportunity to guess the year of a certain Grateful Dead show that was being streamed, and I made it to the finals, and the moderator wound up putting on a couple of years that my guest had foisted on him, and I was enraged because the it wasn't even that the sound quality was bad. It was just that it was they were good. They were really good, hard years. It was hard to define in my ear. Granted, it had been over an hour into the show, but in any event, I heard back from my guest, and we've been trading some emails and get a chance today to talk to him about a myriad of different things. Nick Paumgarten, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, Jake. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor, man. I did want to talk about I read this the Boomer and Carton the cat on WFAN. It was a fascinating piece that you wrote about him.
Yeah, Craig Carton. Yeah,
Craig Carton, and I was long gone from New York when they really became popular, but it's amazing to me time and time again when I read your work, and for that matter, the way I've been reading a lot of people that have written for the New Yorker for a long time. I wanted to ask you about how you decide, in terms of getting information through questions or, sort of background or research, and then deciding how you want to write about it. And I'll give you an example. Like right at the beginning, you talk about him getting out of bed, and you see this sort of couple maybe out early morning and lovebirds maybe, and he gets in the shower, gets out, comes downstairs, walks down the stairs, and the woman comes up and says, are you Craig Carton? He said, yes, I am. And she said, you're under arrest. I'm the FBI. And I wanted to know, like, that was written in like a story form, but how do you decide how you want to portray each of these scenes within the actual article?
I don't know how I decide it. I guess that's part of the process. Is you go out into the world, and in this case, I reached out to Craig Carton, who was at that point, awaiting sentencing, I think.
Absolutely.
And he tells me his story, and he tells me his story in a dramatic, personal, first person way. And then then my job is to check his story, hear the other versions of the story, find out how much of what he said, holds up to scrutiny, how much of it is his version of events that's delusional, whatever it may be. But that particular lead, as we call it, to the story was that was his story as he told it to me, and I just basically transform what is his first person narration of an incident in his life, and sort of tell it from a third person omniscient narrator point of view. So now, instead of me just quoting him, I'm writing it as though I know it, as though I know what's inside his mind. But the only way I know what's inside his mind is because he has conveyed that to me about his state of mind and about his process, his slowly dawning recognition that what was happening to him was that he was getting arrested.
So this is really important because this is brilliant, man. Maybe it's so ingrained that when did you start to cultivate? Is transforming? I don't remember learning that at Boston University, but maybe we did. But when did
I don't know. I don't know where that. It's from reading, I suppose.
Yeah.
I know that there's sort of different schools of journalism. You can't really do that in a newspaper. It's storytelling,
right?
But nonfiction long form nonfiction, I think, allows for that conceit that when you're writing about someone and you're writing about what they're seeing or what they're experiencing, or even, God forbid, what's in their mind, which is just another version of what they're seeing and what they're hearing. But anyway, that you are doing so on the basis of information that they have given you almost directly, not even, it can be even close to verbatim, or you're slightly turning it into something a little more, I don't know, just you turning it into your own prose. But yeah, the idea is that he describes the experience to me. I tell the experience as though I were narrating him as a character in a novel. But I'm not making anything up, and everything. So, for example, the way the New Yorker works is from that scene, the fact checker will call him and go through it and sort of, phrase by phrase, detail by detail, thought by thought, check that those are things that he has said that he would cop to, that he still, that he still holds to be true.
Right.
So it's not it's not like new journalism or whatever you call that. It's not. I'm not playing fast and loose, except with the narrative technique, I guess. But it's not something it's not something I think about too technically. It's just sort of, I don't know where I picked it up. I mean, I've obviously read some over the years and developed a style and a point of view and a way of taking the information I get from the reporting and turning it into a story. You
Well,
know,
also, like, I mean, it brings the reader in. I mean, just reading it like that, you have to decide what's going to be more uh, tantalizing for the reader. To me, it's like almost your work in some ways is like small mini forms of, like, it could be like a Netflix series. It goes back and forth, and I'm always fascinated by, you know, not to get, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but you're a little bit older than me, and I was wondering if you could talk about some really cool, eccentric teachers that you had that sort of opened your mind to this, because you're not playing fast and loose. This is total script writing in some ways, and I'm just wondering if you could talk about cats that you were inspired by in high school or even college that opened your mind to a less linear way of writing.
that's interesting. I mean, I could talk about actual teachers that I had, English teachers, writing teachers. I could talk about editors that I've had. I could talk about, I mean, a lot of it's from reading or seeing films or watching documentaries or, just, or being around people when they tell stories. I had good teachers. I had good English teachers in grade school who, I
Mm-hmm.
think, starting the first story I ever wrote, like in fifth grade, was about an old teacher at a school, an old batty lady, who goes to see her former pupils who are now graduated and are now like New York City grown-ups. And the whole conceit was that they each had a different point of view of, that she regards them as a bunch of jackasses because they're like, Upper East Side
Yep.
grown-ups,
Yeah, totally.
and they now regard her as this sort of batty old eccentric. um I mean, obviously in fifth grade I was blessed with even then with the gift of being able to see points of view and other people's points of view and whatever you call it, empathy. Um and that wasn't taught. That was just probably just picked up from, reading children's books and watching movies. uh but I had good teachers, a lot of good teachers. Some of them were teachers that later got in trouble for things, but they were good English teachers. They were good readers. They were good. They were critics of writing. They demand things of me. They would say things. I remember one teacher accusing me of being a stylist in this hissing tone. It was like I was wounded by it.
Hmm. Why was that? Explain why that was like. Why did that sting so bad?
Because it just means, I think the way he said it, it was that I was putting on airs. It was pretentious, and
Oh man.
that's that stung. age 17. But it hit a chord, and writing can be pretentious because you're trying to create something special, and it's a show offy, in some ways, egotistical form. And that particular moment in time, like I got, it was like a little swipe from the ruler, proverbial swipe of the ruler onto the palm, and it stuck with me, and I've tried not to be that thing, not to be guilty of that. Even if, as my friends accuse me, I often use I'll use a $10 word here and there, and force them to look shit up, and
Oh yeah, you're already making me look stuff up. But I mean,
I mean, that's partly because it's like it's a cool word. I mean, whether I
absolutely,
knew it
totally.
beforehand or not, or it's the perfect word, or it's like, why not use these words that are lying around? They're kind of awesome. It's not, but it's not to show off or to be like, look how smart I am. It's just like, look at this one, you know. And then then you try to it's almost like then you to balance accounts, then you use something like colloquial or slangy, and you try to keep keep it at par. Anyway.
Well, I want to read. So, I mean, let's just go a little bit deeper on this. This is intertwining two of the reason we connected to begin with, which was the Grateful Dead. This is a quote from Billy Kreutzmann, and then you can extrapolate on your own career. Doesn't completely apply to journalism because, like you said, you do have editors that have to rein you in sometimes. You're on a word limit, but this is what he said. The question was, what musician influenced you most? Billy said, Elvin Jones, one of John Coltrane's drummers. I couldn't steal a lick from that man, and I wouldn't want to. But what he taught me is freedom, total freedom of expression, that it's legal to do anything you can think of. And I'm not even in your, I'm just talking like early on. Um, can you talk about if you, if there was a point in your career where you stopped writing, I don't want to say in fear, but you realized that as long as you stayed within certain guidelines, um, and it was legal to do anything, you could think of, right? Not just stylistically, but in the format as well.
That's a good question, as they say, which means it's a good question, but it's also a hard one to answer properly.
Well, you can do, and again, this is
Yeah,
you just riff off the cup, I'm sure something brilliant.
no, I mean, it's very true. I mean, first of all, I still write in fear. I'm terrified. Terrified
Mm-hmm.
of being found out. I'm terrified of being boring, boorish. I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to be thought of as stupid or pretentious. All those things. And plus, deadlines are just scary, and it's hard to make stuff come out. I do feel guardrails constantly. I have 1,000 principles and tenets and rules that sort of bounce around all the time. Everything from like the ethics of journalism and sort of moral code stuff, privacy or respect. There's all kinds of layers of that, and then there's yeah, indecency, and then there's questions, legal questions, storytelling parameters that are rules, grammatical rules. There's the order of operations. That whole problem of like, if you're gonna say something that requires prior information to understand it, okay, well then I got to put that prior information. Well, how do I do that? That kind of stuff, like that stupid stuff. It's like working in an electric circuit board or something
Mm.
that occupies a ton of time, and that's very rules based. Um, but yeah, what you're saying is what made me think that like I'm not just painting by numbers, that you can do stuff with the occasional flourish. You can do stuff that has style. You can do stuff that sort of occasionally breaks the format. I again, I don't know if there's one person. I think it's reading novels, reading reading Ferlinghetti in junior year of high school. It could be that. It was encountering Don DeLillo for the first time.
Mm.
Reading Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brautigan, that was like, what the hell is this? Um, you know,
Love that. Yeah, totally.
but then it could be, reading John McPhee, who's the opposite of Richard Brautigan, very, very deliberate, structured, but um, encountering some of the new journalism stuff in my, reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas,
Sure.
um, and reading that kind of stuff at a time when I was, experimenting with certain things myself, so some of that's expansion of mind went along with expansion of reading but I still feel like I'm not an experimental. I still feel like I'm a square writer. I'm a New Yorker writer. I'm not Borges, for Christ's sake. I mean, I'm
No,
big.
but I mean but it's here's the point.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you could the stuff wouldn't make it in there if it was that experimental, but there's still this flavor of um there's an essence of pushing the boundaries just a little bit in terms of the words that you might use, or like we talked about transforming certain things. And I just wonder if you could talk to younger cats especially about I remember, it's funny, Joe Russo, in my interview with him, um, from JRAD, he said that one time he was in this band called Fat Mama, and they were playing in the Midwest somewhere in some upholstered bar, some upholstered sewer bar, and it was a sports bar. Nobody cared what they were playing, and he was fighting it during that tour. But then that night, because for whatever reason, the confluence of events and just sort of nobody caring, he said that it was cathartic. He stopped playing in fear, and yet here you are saying that you are still in fear. And some people would say that that keeps pushing you forward. And I wanted you to talk to younger cats about being vulnerable to fear and how that is continued to keep you, uh, I don't know if the right word is edgy, but it's kept you on that line. Because I think a lot of people, a lot of younger people, especially in today's world, they're protected from pain. Their folks don't necessarily want to expose them to failure or pain. And I know that the greatest adversity in my life made me stronger. So I just kind of wanted you to riff on fear and how that has been a pivotal part of your makeup.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when I say I write from fear, I mean, I think I named some things that I was afraid of that are they're relatively petty. Um, ultimately, what I'm afraid of are things that I'm afraid of death and destruction. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of pestilence or loneliness. So that, like, those things are things that one is afraid of. So
Hmm.
like failing, I've learned not to be afraid of fucking up a writing assignment as much as I used to be,
Right.
because I've done it a lot, so it'll get done. B, if it doesn't get done, like, no one's gonna die. So I have some perspective where I'm like, I'm just, and then I force myself to do the work. But when I'm doing the work, when it's happening, um, I'm often having a pretty good time, as much as I complain about it. I actually like making sentences. I like trying to say things in a fresh way, in a succinct way, and I like to do it in a way that would, like, amuse my friends. It's like I'm trying to amuse myself and amuse my friends. I'm not thinking so much about God. I want to write a bestseller. I hope this is a big hit on the website, or I don't care. I don't really care about that. I want to amuse my editor. I want to amuse my friends,
I love it.
uh, and do the thing right. And just it's sort of like, I mean, the Grateful Dead, just go up there and play. And Jerry Garcia just loved to play guitar. And he wasn't playing to get famous or rich.
And he
Uh,
hated the R word was a dirty word, rehearsal. There was not,
yeah,
you weren't, the music was not overly precious.
right. But yet he was also a professional.
That's right.
He was also had stage fright. He was also critical of himself. And when he screwed up, which was often, I think it embarrassed him. And as much as he, I think, had this facade of being like, yeah, man, just play, and he didn't like making mistakes. He didn't like laying down a clam. I don't think he liked forgetting the lyrics to Franklin's Tower. I think it embarrassed him, and because he was a professional. But I think he built up a sort of a worldview around allowing himself to fail so that he could continue to get up there and have the guts to keep doing it. In the same way that the band would talk about, oh, we're free form, it's all anarchistic, we make it up as we go along. That wasn't really true, but they kind of built up a mythology around themselves, which gave them room to do the thing that they did, which was sort of half of what they said it was.
You're absolutely
Uh,
correct. They weren't good enough musicians to do what they said they were doing, but
right,
they
and they
they
also they played, they opened with half step, and then they went to here, and then they did that, and they did this, and then they did the cowboy tunes, and it was, and they played them a certain way. I mean, obviously when they opened up in the Dark Star, or it was improvised, but it's a lot of it's one chord, two chord jams, and it's within a certain parameter, and so I mean, but still doing what they were doing was absurd, relatively speaking, to be without rehearsal, without a real plan, just in trying to do it from also just from memory. You must remember the experience of being at a show more when you're there than when you're listening on tape, where when you listen on tape, you know exactly where you are in the jam. You're like, oh, it's the second pass on, they love each other or whatever.
right.
But when you're there, sometimes you're like, where am I in the song? I have no idea. When you're there and you're watching, you're like, how could they know where they are?
Oh, man.
And I'm not talking
I
about like where they're
yeah.
deep into Dark Star. I'm talking about like just what part of Let It Grow are they in?
But first of all, just for the audience, it's just so cosmic because Nick Paumgarten went to his first show was arguably one of my favorite shows. I listened to it relentlessly. Somehow somebody got a VHS camcorder, archaic into the venue at Meriwether Post, 62784. And I have to be honest, I mean, before we get into that show specifically, what was your were you aware of some kind of Essence of the Dead? When was the first time you really got hip to them? Was it a poster? Was it an advertisement? Because I would say they came to Mary Post in '83, but maybe you just weren't on the bus by then. When did you first
Yeah.
kind of?
So yeah, I could tell you
Yeah,
so technically, well, not technically, the first show I went to was the night before, 6/26/84.
amazing
Uh,
show. Yeah, yeah.
and 6/27/84, after the fact, you realize it's a better show. Um, I hardly knew what was happening. So I was 15. I had encountered the Grateful Dead for the first time, as like a schoolboy. I had Skull and Roses, not Skull and Roses. Sorry, I had the Greatest Hits,
Skeletons. Yeah,
Skulls from the Closet.
yeah.
Um, and I started knowing that I was going to be hanging around all these kids in prep school who were deadheads. I started listening to it and was like, huh, what is this? I mean, like everybody had the experience of not really, it's not a coherent uh, display of the song of the band's musical universe. It's obviously it shows a lot of diverse styles, but it's got Rosemary on it, and or no, it was yeah, Rosemary's on that album, right? I mean, it's on a Greatest Hits album. It's so strange.
I think so. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
and then you go Love Light. What does that have to do with? But and then I wrote a story for the New Yorker years ago, like 12 years ago, 10 years ago, called Deadhead, and I wrote about this. But basically, I had a friend who said he had gone to see the Dead, and that they were sitting around in stools. They were like these hippies sitting around in stools eating spaghetti, and that was like the first picture outside of like seeing those images of skulls or whatever. That was the first picture I had in my mind of what the
Wow,
Grateful Dead were.
wow.
I have since, decided that what he was talking about was, and I don't think he had gone. His sister had gone, I think, and she'd seen them at Radio City in 1980. We were 11 years old. They probably played their acoustic set, so they're sitting in stools, and she probably said they were just noodling around. They were noodling,
They were.
and
Oh,
somehow like
that is so classic.
and
My God.
noodling became like hippies eating spaghetti. So I always had this like fabulous furry freak brothers, like men in overalls, like which they kind of were at a certain point in their career. Ironically,
They absolutely
yeah,
were. Yeah,
they
totally.
weren't in 1982, but so that was something. And then I go to prep school, everybody's listening to him, and I did this in Amir Barlev's movie too. This whole spiel about the older, cooler kids had all these tapes, and you start listening to them, and I sort of underplayed. I've underplayed, and whenever I describe this, the role that the live albums played, because really I was a vinyl generation, so we listened to vinyl a lot. We had Europe '72, Skullfuck, Dead Set, Reckoning, Live Dead, like those five. That was sort of the very basis of learning about the band as the live sound and
Hmm.
getting more of the
Right.
songs and really understanding that they had all these different modes that connected to different years. I mean, go from Live Dead to Europe '72 to Dead Set to Reckoning. Like that was okay. This is deep. And so it was like spring of my freshman year, I started really listening, and coincidentally, like smoking weed and stuff. So that's when
Yeah, your ears started to open
you
up a
start
lot. Yeah, it's
years
beautiful.
open up.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like a rock and roll kid, classic rock kid. I loved heavy metal. I loved punk music. I like pop music. I like I like soul music. I like classical music. I like country. I liked all that stuff as a kid, but this stuff grabbed me. And then I went to that show at Meriwether Post Pavilion. The first one was 626, sort of kind of arrived just as the show was beginning, like ran in when they were kicking into Casey Jones. And
Dude, I know, first of all, I want to tell you something. 627 is deep in my heart.
yeah,
626 is a really hot show because the Casey Jones, Stranger, and Brent, I think possibly, and I don't think you're going to know this, but maybe broke a chandelier. I think he was playing with one hand, played Don't Need Love in the second set. It was very
yeah.
tripped out. It was an unbelievable show. Continue, please.
I mean, it was, I just remember, I mean, the first thing you remember is the scene, is the
Oh,
heads, there's freaks everywhere. And this is before Touch of Grey. This is like, it was still very underground.
I know it was my favorite. This is
1984, it's
so
still the
sick.
70s.
Oh my
It's
God.
like
Unbelievable. Please
the
talk about the
cars,
scene. Talk about the scene.
yeah,
Yeah.
the cars were shitty cars. It's people like they're just, thousands and thousands of real hippies. And it wasn't as like, I guess they're college kids, a lot of them. So, but I was just 15. So and they were sort of biker types. It was much gnarlier than,
It was authentic. You didn't have the
yeah,
The
yeah.
Trustafarians hadn't taken over at that
They
point.
may have been there, but they didn't, nobody was that rich yet. And they were also,
Right.
everybody looked like dirtbags, even the Trustafarians.
Right.
And I didn't know the difference really. Like they were just, and I had weird encounters, but to the extent that I was able to focus on the music, I mean, I remember certain things, and obviously some of the, China Rider was something I remember just blew my mind, and I listened to that China Rider. That's the first thing I listened to when Jerry died,
I got to go back and listen to that
and
one.
it's like it's a romping China Rider, like that high pace, like
Super speed. Yeah,
pounding
loving.
fast and hard, and I just remember the power of that. So we were outside the pavilion, so it was there was almost like a layer of distance. Um, I wish I'd been in the pavilion because I think that pavilion was a special place. The sound. There are moments the next night, and then the following year in '85 when I was also there. When you listen to the odd tapes, there
Well,
are tapes.
you were at 85. That was a
Yeah,
very magical
that was a
run. Yeah.
magical weekend.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my god! Oh my god! But anyway, you can hear on some of those tapes, like Phil lays down a couple bombs that just like the people, and you can just hear it, like it's like it's like a cyclone hitting the shore. You can just hear the people just go whoosh, and
Oh my
like
God.
a kind of a, it's a cheer, but it's not like a cheer in a hockey game. It's just like a whoa, like it's basically 3,000 people saying whoa, you know. And that was a special place down in there. Anyway, so yeah, China Rider, and then
They
also,
did it. I think they did the He's Gone.
yeah, Women Are Smarter. Blue, that was fun. It's like I knew what that music was, and he's gone, I probably, got distracted for a while and smoked a joint, and then it has a great, has a great post jam, post,
Oh,
the
space. Yeah, unbelievable.
no,
Very
no, no, no,
weird.
just no, the post he's
Oh, the
gone,
jam out of He's Gone. Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah, and like,
unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah.
it's not a caution jam, but it's a cool thing with Bobby doing some cool stuff, and then yeah, it was just an incredible experience. But the next night is obviously that's one of my favorite tapes too, and it's not beloved anywhere, like it's not recognized anywhere as a great show. Like if anybody were to be like top 40 morning dews, people don't mention that one. I'm like, but it's my favorite.
Dude,
Um,
I want to
but
just tell you something. I'm not sure. First of all, I agree with you. I've listened to the first set. It's so fascinating. Do you realize you were there, but in the soundboard, on the video, and and even the audience, Brent's keyboard, and I think maybe one reason it hasn't shown up as a Dave's picks or gets neglected until Brent's uh, piano is
yeah,
completely out of the mix until Let It Grow. All of a sudden, it just flies into the mix. Now his organ works, but the piano's missing. The Friend of the Devil solo, you can't hear his piano. You just hear
really,
Jerry playing these beautiful rhythm chops. Anyway, I just did you get up to the general mission in that show, or were you still out in the behind out in the
I,
grat
I only ever saw it there as from the lawn.
the lawn?
I I think I got down at one point in '85 down to the back of the pavilion because I have some sense of it, but I don't know. I mean, that was they 6/30/85, the famous Shakedown show was one of the more sort of cosmic nights of my life. Just
Well, you want to talk
gen
about that? Yeah, please talk. I mean, I am my whole show is related to is the cosmic relevance of humanity. So I would love you to
well,
talk
I
about
mean,
that.
it was just a I mean, obviously it's induced by I think they were Goonie birds. I can't remember.
You
It was blocked.
with some mushrooms or something, or what was it?
No, it was acid,
It
but
was, oh wow.
we
So
got
you
just
got
had a we
yeah.
had a big night that night. Yeah, and it went on and on and on. I mean, the show was well over before the adventure ended. It's one of
Oh
those.
my God. No, it's good. I
I mean,
mean,
we're 16 years old. I wouldn't. Don't try this at home, kiddies. Kind of thing.
well, going back to the scene for a minute. I mean, it might have been a bunch of dirt, real hippies, but I don't know, man. Like, did you feel like what is the right word I'm looking for? I mean, I'm debating whether to go to see Billy Strings tomorrow in Phoenix, and it's like, just outside of the ticket prices and sort of the hyper security, and you don't know what is going on, and quite frankly, you're sort of disassociated. Everybody's coming from their own walks of life. Did you feel, even though you were just so young, did you feel like there was a familial quality to that vibe? Because that pre In the Dark, pre Coma Dead to me it is so raw, and it is really the last. I mean, they got into so much MIDI technology in the late '80s, it kind of threw me off. But I mean, the drummers were still carrying all their percussion in '83 and '84. I mean, it was pretty.
Yeah.
And I just wanted you to talk about that family component. Was that something that was unique to you in terms of the concert experience?
Um, and I agree with you completely. I'm a pre-coma guy.
Yeah.
It still had that raw punk with a very small p energy, like American
Oh,
underground energy.
exactly, dude. Exactly.
Then the Dancing Bear era was something completely different, and the popularity and the cover of Rolling Stone. It was all nice. It was great to see and get recognized, and suddenly see this weird thing of yours turn up in popular culture. That was kind of cool, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same thing. And I'm not saying, oh, it was much cooler when nobody was into it, or the old days were better. But there was something about that, early Reagan America, MTV cultural, waste, that where they were kind of rumbling around, this old rickety train, something special.
Dude, it
Yeah,
was so
and so
sick. Yeah.
and
Go
it,
ahead.
but it's true that I mean, I did feel. I mean, it's hard to know what came first, chicken or the egg here, because by then I'd been listening to this stuff and it had some experiences, and was perhaps projecting onto it something that I wanted it to be. But that's the way I perceived it, was that, like, this is an incredible, the energy was different from, I'd gone to concerts already. I'd gone to see, concerts at the Garden. I'd gone to Jones Beach. I'd gone to all these places as a, to see concerts, and that was very much you go to concert and they play the songs and you watch them play the songs. But this was definitely this people the level of anticipation and excitement and sort of fellow feeling was definitely new to me, and it got me, got me in the guts. That said, I mean, I'm not one of those. I'm like a prickly deadhead, I'm not a big steam guy. I was not like Mr. Rainstick.
Right, right. No, I dig.
I'm a New York City guy. I'm a little cranky. I'm kind of, I can be
You're an urban deadhead. You know,
yeah, and I kind of
yeah.
walk around, I'd walk up some in the parking lot, I'd be like, yeah, this goddamn, what a Jesus Christ. I wasn't all like, hey, yeah.
Right,
I'm just
I
not
did.
that
I did.
guy.
Hmm.
Not that but there's a part of me that got some of that from that too. Um, so it
Did
and
you
that's
did you did you go? I'm just curious in those early innocent years. Um, what was the longest I don't mini tour that you went on with the Dead?
yeah, I mean that's the thing is because I'm going to boarding school, so I can't really follow the band. And
I just
then
want to be clear. Your folks, you guys, you grew up in Gotham, but then you went to prep school down in Maryland somewhere,
no, I went up in New Hampshire, and
New
it was
Hampshire.
and it was a big deal there. It was a really big deal there. It was a whole scene. Um, and then and so what happened is while I was in school, you would go, you'd get one weekend of the spring tour. You'd take a weekend away,
Sure.
and maybe one of the fall tour. So I kind of would hit one or two in the spring and fall of each of those years, and then there'd be the summer. There was 2 summers at Meriwether, and then the summer of '86, I went out to California.
You
Was
went to
actually
Pe-
driving
Wow.
across I met some friends in Vegas, and we drove across the desert overnight to arrive at Ventura. And we sort of were maybe recapitulating some Hunter S. Thompson driving in the desert at night
Absolutely.
overnight, and we pulled into a Denny's out somewhere outside of Barstow, and or whatever it was, and sit down, and the guy behind the counter is like, "Where are you guys going?" And we're like, "We're going to see the Grateful Dead." He's like, "Haven't you heard? Jerry Garcia's in a coma."
That's
We're
right.
like, "What?"
Ventura. That's
So
right.
we rolled into Ventura at dawn, and there was sort of a forlorn scene in the parking lot, and we just kind
This
of hung
is
out.
absolutely insane. I cannot believe because I thought you might have gotten into the Greek or Palo Alto. Those were some hot little shows in May.
No, I
You went to
mean,
Ventura after because Garcia was deteriorating significantly on that Dylan summer tour, and then you go to Ventura, and please talk about that. Must have been so. How did you feel? You must. I mean, my heart would have been ripped out at that
yeah,
point.
it was because I mean, that was like peak love for the music, and until later, but here we were. I'm 17, and I'm across the continent from my parents. We have a car, we have lots of goodies, and we're ostensibly out there to quote look at colleges, but
Right.
I had a job waiting for me on a ranch, outside of Reno, and so I thought I was going to be going to all those shows in the summer of '86. But no, because he went into the coma after the. I didn't go to the show down at RFK or any of that stuff where it was a million degrees, Tom Petty and Dylan, all that stuff. And the last show I had seen before that was 4186 in Providence, which was a great show actually.
Amazing show. I wasn't that. I don't believe that. I think the night before someone threw a beer bottle at Billy and they didn't do an encore. I can't remember
Yeah.
which show that was. But I want to ask you how. Please tell me that Paumgarten. I mean, roll. I mean, you may have been still in New York. I don't know when summer break was over for the boarding school. Club Casino Ballroom, epic August '84 Garcia band shows up there. You hip to those shows? 813,
No,
814.
I kill myself over that.
I
We had no
cannot believe you didn't
idea.
go there.
I
That's
didn't even
ridiculous.
know it existed. It was that sweaty club where he ripped the cover off the ball. The guy that's like speedballing himself to death with John Kahn,
Absolutely. There's a little
just
picket
killing
fence
it.
there. Unbelievable.
120 degrees in that flat floor, cement floor, aluminum barn. I mean, that would have probably scared the shit out of me at that age. But I mean, that's the
Ah,
stuff. I mean, even later, all the way through, like, why didn't I go to more Garcia band shows? I mean, I went to my fair share, but I should have gone to more. Because
Did
every
you?
time I went, I was like, this is the thing. This is the thing. Inject it straight into my veins. Yeah.
Also like, yeah, I mean, it was just, I mean, there was always that tour actually is so classic because for the one and only time, I mean, they played Nassau Coliseum countless times, but this is the one and only time, about 3 or 4 days after Club Casino, they played Good Skates roller rink in East Setauket, New York, which is 5 minutes from my house, and
Oh man.
no air conditioning, roller
Yeah.
rink, and
That's the one
people.
that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, with the low ceiling.
Yeah, that's the one. I mean, just people like my buddy was there, just was sweltering hot, but I mean, the
Yeah.
music was on fire.
Yeah.
Gritty Garcia. This is the question I had. No, there was no social media. You had some dead newsletters. Were you just as honestly as you can? I mean, 'cause you were also young. Was there any chatter, even in '85 or even in '86? Did anybody really know in the Deadhead scene that Jerry was that bad? I mean, we talk about Augusta because we have the video and people are like, oh, his skin was yellow, green. Did anybody really know at that time?
I don't know. Again, I was a kid, so my I got on board. The first time I saw him was at Merriweather, and he looked like crap, but I was far away. But he looked like he was a frightening sight, haloed from behind by the
Oh,
light. He
yeah,
didn't move. Um, you know, uh, and yet the guitar, the stuff that was coming out of his guitar was incredible.
it was incredible.
But so then the next time I see him, because I don't get to go to Augusta, and that's another story. But then next time I saw him, I think was spring '85 in Philadelphia.
Didn't you go to Richmond or Charlotte or something in '84?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
You pointed me toward those, and I listened to those again. But I
Yeah.
love them. I just
Yeah.
love that era, and we're kind of in the minority on that. But
No, but
but,
I mean, dude, I don't care because it's
but
the
they're all
only
wrong.
thing I listen to. They are wrong, dude.
They're all wrong. But
Next time
yes.
in '85, yeah. I'm just wondering
So
if there
so
was
I,
like
I
chatter.
no,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
so I went to see him at Nassau Coliseum, and it was the shortest show they'd ever played. And he's a little healthier now than he was in '84, but it was, there were short shows. He was huge. And then the next time I go is Philadelphia, and he has no voice. It's like the froggiest night of his career.
Wow. Was it 4.7 or something? 4.8?
Four
85?
six, 4.7. I
Yeah.
can't remember which one
But
it is, but
wow.
you
Yeah.
know
So he
they,
has real froggy voice, right? Right.
he comes out, he sings Dupree's, and it's like, oh my. And he delivered on the guitar. It was an incredible night of playing, and it was an
Sure.
incredible night for me and my young friends. But nonetheless, it was a sense of like, oh, and that built into my head like this sense that this is fragile. He's declining. Any given night, he could be sick as a dog. Um, so it was not a complete and utter shock to hear that but I mean, we didn't know about diabetes, right? And I don't think we really had a sense of. I didn't have a sense of what heroin addiction really was and what he was dealing
Absolutely. Absolutely
with.
correct. No, I mean, it's funny because you would know. I just feel like in today's modern era, the chatter would be
Yeah,
incessant, and whereas before he was definitely guarded. And you're right, it was a diabetic thing. Um, it's just, I think that, do you feel like, as the years went on, um, that, I mean, maybe it's an obvious answer to this question, but how do you feel do you think that the Dead and their ability to sort of entertain in these non-formula trip shows, like you said, you'd go to concerts and you'd see the band perform a song, whatever band it is, just the way it was on the record. And here with the Dead, you might have a snoozer first set, and then all of a sudden they're busting out Morning Dew to open the second set, Rochester '80, and it's the
yeah.
greatest thing. And do you feel like in some way just that versatility and that sort of inability that synesthesia or that inability to pigeonhole allowed you in some way to be so versatile as a writer? Because I mean, I just know I'd fall apart even if I was a professional trying to write about stuff like business or art, not outside of certain music, but you've been able to write so much about so many different things, and I just wonder if the Dead sort of that sort of those tentacles maybe sort of had an ability for you to sort of give you that idea that you could write about anything.
I mean, I think I could only cop to that on a subconscious level, so I wouldn't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
definitely
did.
don't. I don't. God forbid, I would model my writing on a Grateful Dead song or a Grateful Dead performance.
Yeah,
Um, uh,
62784 be all right, but yeah, that's
yeah,
all
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
I do occasionally slip little like
That
you know.
morning dew, man, is the sickest dew of all
I
time.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it, but I mean, well, no, it's also what 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 do they have in common? Well, I could start bullshitting, which is what writers do, but I think one thing is that and this is the thing for me with the Grateful Dead is that especially Garcia is really melodic. He's got a real sense of it's about beautiful music. He believes in beautiful melodies.
Totally.
In other, he believes in beauty. A lot of music that people like, and a lot of music that I like. If it's punk inflected, or it's about attitude, it's about noise, it's about energy, all these other things, which I also love. I mean, I like some hardcore. I like some pretty heavy metal. But he believes in beauty. For him, that's the way his ear worked. That's the way, and he played the music that he likes to listen, like he likes to hear. Um,
And as it
so
relates to to me, a
yeah,
lot of your
I want the
creation, yeah,
sentences to be. I want the sentences to be clear, but but to have some beauty in them. You know, if possible.
how I guess
A
the bet.
paragraph. I often say about Jerry is that like he played in paragraphs. He didn't just like hammer up and down. He didn't noodle a lot of the time. He actually, some of these solos were actually had architecture that was like imagined on the spot or felt as he was doing it, or was it, or he was connecting things that he'd been working on. Um, but they read like paragraphs. There's a logic to it, and when he lands, it's like he lands the thing, and it's like it's the end of a paragraph. Period. Return new paragraph, and that is as an aesthetic, as something to reach for. There's probably some affinity there, but that's a preference I have in my music and art. Um,
How did
I
you?
like chaos. I mean, I like chaos too. Of course, one of the great things about the Grateful Dead is chaos. I mean, even Miami 1989, Dark Star just scaring the shit out of all the touch heads who are, being taken for the first time to see the Dead, and
The
given some
touch heads, dude.
a
The touch
cap, and
heads.
they're given
Love
that,
it.
and they play this like half an hour malevolent Dark Star, and everybody leaves, has to flee the arena. I love that stuff too. Uh, but he is a beautiful player, Garcia. His lines, and I like that. I admire that.
I do too. I mean, it's remarkable the stuff that was just flowing out of him on the spot too, which is. Uh, did you ever work in any kind of hard news capacity?
Uh,
I mean, because
you
it's
know,
impressive. If you say no, then that's really one of the most impressive deals. I mean, I was trying to. The question I had was like, how if you did, how you sort of have, you learned to temper your own biases and sort of keep an open mind to all the information out there, not get caught in a bubble.
I worked for a weekly newspaper in New York called the New York Observer, which was, it was driven by reporting, and we sought to make news and break news, and you reported things, and it had a newspaper format, but it was a little cracked. It had it had a mischievous wink to it too, and
Hmm.
so it had attitude. And so and that was, it wasn't the New York Times, it wasn't the Washington Post, it wasn't
The Atlanta Journal
Herald,
Constitution. Yeah,
you know.
I did. Yeah.
Uh, so no, I never really have. Uh, but that was as close to it as I got.
What was mischievous? I mean, what did you? What kind of stories were you?
All
They were.
kinds.
Yeah.
It's a lot about New York, and sort of poking fun at powerful people, covering covering politics, the culture industry, sort of finance, and the whole city. The sort of aspirational tumult of the city, and people trying to everyone on the make, and you just sort of write about them in a way where you're often poking them in the eye, and or pasting a kick me sign on their back and running away. It was a little bit, it
Yeah.
was we were a bunch of kids. We were all horribly underpaid. We had great editors, smart people, and we were kind of scrappy, and we thought of ourselves as underdogs, as like the Bad News Bears. And
I still
so
think
it
I
was
love
it
that.
was fun. It was fun. It was a great place to work. I learned a lot from a lot of good people. But it was, there was definitely an emphasis on break news. But we weren't square enough to really be the New York Times.
Well, yeah, and I
We
mean, it
were
gets to a
basically.
point. Yeah, I mean, it gets to a point where sometimes you're finding news to break as opposed to actual news, And then I am wondering if you could talk about the pivotal, if there was a seminal piece of work that, as you look back now, it opened a door for you. Somebody took notice and gave you the opportunity to either do talk of the town, got you in. Who was the cat that, obviously it's everybody's choice to walk through the door once it's open, but who opened that door for you into a, the not so locker room ish observer, and into more of the I don't know, the upper echelons of the New Yorker?
Well, I got hired at the New Yorker uh, in the year 2000 at the age of 30, 31. David Remnick hired me. I was hired by Susan Morrison, who was the editor of Talk of the Town, and I was hired to be a reporter, a writer, and also an editor. So I was doing both.
Hmm.
So I was sort of a deputy editor of the Talk of the Town. So I was editing Talk of the Town pieces, and which is a lot of rewrite work. They hired me, I think, in some ways to be a rewrite man, and I was also writing them. And so it was really that, going from the treehouse to the to the main house.
The Sandlot. Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I
it
did.
was
Yeah.
that was, it meant that maybe I can do this. Maybe I don't have to go to law school. Maybe I don't have to run away and join the circus. It was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And there were a lot of very smart and generous people at the New Yorker, writers, editors, fact checkers who are awesome, and others who have been supportive and helpful, and who have busted my chops, and that's really, it's this one opportunity. Getting that job was a blessing for me. It's a good fit. It has been a good fit. As someone who was raised in New York City, raised on New Yorker cartoons, and on James Thurber, and
Roger Angel. Yeah, I mean, all, yeah,
Evie
totally.
White, and all these
Yeah.
guys. That was just, it was in my DNA anyway. So I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity, and to still have it. I mean, and the thing keeps evolving. I mean, the funny thing is, I've said this to other people, like the New Yorker, everybody has a picture of what it is in their head, but it evolves and it changes over time as the people change, as the times change, as the sort of nature of media changes. I mean, they're a little like the Grateful Dead. It's just like it
Yeah,
keeps evolving.
did the audiences keep getting younger? That is what the dead.
Well,
No,
they not. I mean, not really. Well, they do. Yeah. I mean, we have a younger readership,
sure,
obviously. So all the ones that were reading it when we were kids, right? They're all dead.
sure. No,
So
that's explain. I really, if you can, how, not specifically you, but how has the New Yorker adapted? How has it changed in this era of I don't know what else. It's just cognitive dissonance. No longer is there just this, everybody can disagree on the same set of facts. Now it's just everybody's in their own silo, and there's so much dissonance, and you guys are rooted in uh commentary based on reality, and we're not all there, especially in the political climate, and I wonder how you guys have adapted to
Well, I mean, maybe I won't answer the question head on, but I'll say that, they've obviously evolved. We now have a thriving and very prolific web operation. It's almost like a daily newspaper, and stuff every day comes out, putting
Right.
out a ton of stories. Uh, it's reporting, commentary. It's not just the magazine once a week. It's an ongoing daily enterprise. And there's the videos, there's the radio show. So there's a lot coming out. It's a big operation. There are people, of all kinds working there. There are a lot of staff writers, and we're not in the office really. We're just all like strewn all over the world. And some of us are, you know, better writers than reporters. Some of us are better reporters than writers. Some of us are, it contains multitudes. Uh, I think that this era, whatever you want to call it, this age of humankind, which is to my eyes a pretty crappy age.
Yeah.
uh,
Human animals at this point. Yeah.
yeah, I
Totally.
mean
Yeah.
the ape, we're not a good ape.
Not right now. I
But
mean, yeah.
well, we haven't ever been. I mean, nothing ever changes, and people have been horrible to people. I was, anyway, I'm not gonna. But but yeah, I mean, obviously, in some ways, the New Yorker has positioned itself, for whatever set of reasons, as was the opposition to the Trump ascendancy. Um, but it wasn't out of it wasn't necessarily because it's quote unquote liberal or
Absolutely.
it just you know whatever Trump stands for in that context, whether it's in curiosity or, I mean, I don't want to get political here, but it just
I mean,
a
he
lot of that.
basically he stands for everything that's opposite of what. I mean, I feel like you guys are always trying to, no matter what, doesn't matter what the article's about, it makes you want to think, or it makes you even
Right,
think deeper.
thoughtfulness, compassion,
Yeah.
inquiry, nuance,
Yeah, that's the
humor.
opposite of the MAGA movement. So
Yeah,
it's
it is.
natural. Yeah,
Sadly, I mean, that's
it is.
part of
It's
it.
horrible.
There's
Yeah,
because there's a lot of anger and that has to do with real political.
absolutely justified anger, but it's all
Yeah,
being
totally
yeah,
justified
totally.
anger, and it's just there's too much bathwater for that baby. It's
Oh
just
man.
bad, but I don't want to get into it too much because I
No, it's
don't.
fine. You know what? I want to get you on your bike ride, but just one
Yeah,
final question. Set one here. We
yeah,
can take
yeah,
Paumgarten.
sure.
How have you specifically tried to maintain in your journalism a balance between like still connecting with humanity? I mean, I started my show 12 years ago. I didn't know what I was doing. I was reaching out to Pat Martino and Jack DeJohnette and Dave Brubeck, and I realized I wasn't lonely, but I wanted to use technology as a way to connect humanity and make these connections, and that's how we connected. And I just want to know how you. I feel like a lot of journalists today, and through no fault of their own, because we're not a good ape. A lot of there's an imbalance. Technology is superseded, gone way past humanity, and I wonder how you've tried to maintain that balance in your reporting and your research and your writing.
Uh, that's another good question.
We can
uh,
save it for part two. We can do it. If you
no,
want to.
no,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
answer that. I'll
yeah.
answer that, and then we'll uh, yeah, it's interesting because the COVID era and this, I not being in the office all the time and being home a lot, and some of this is just the ages you go through as a human. You're in your 20s and you're out all the time and you're making new friends and your world's kind of expanding, and then you, like in my case, I had kids and you're very devoted to your kids and you're
Right.
just weekends, or in my case, hockey dad, hockey coach, all that, and then suddenly you're empty nester and you're 50 something, and not going to an office, and it's a more static social, less dynamic social environment. The electronic machines have helped. Things like this, I enjoy doing them. I enjoy meeting people. I weirdly have quote unquote friends, that I like email with or text with whom I've never met, which is so weird. But
Right.
these are conversations that go on. I have ongoing conversations all day on text, like a teenager, on my phone with old friends where we're just cracking each other up or arguing about shit. And that's helpful because that is human contact. But there's nothing beats the real thing. And uh, to bring it back to professional, sure, it's wonderful to go to dinner with someone or go have a couple beers, watch a basketball game, whatever it is, go for a walk in the park. These things are sacred. Um, so is for me, and I haven't done it in a while because I've been on book leave, and I'm not going to talk about that now.
No.
But when you go out reporting, I've done like a lot of talk to the town pieces, which are quickies, 2-3 hours with someone. But if you go and like immerse yourself in a story, especially if you're going on site, and I've done a lot of that. Like you go to a place and spend a week, whether it's Davos or the Kitzbühel or the Masters or Margaritaville retirement community, whatever it is. I just go and hang out and work my
I
way in,
love, yeah.
get to know people, listen to people's stories. You're going 20 hours a day. You're hardly sleeping. You're going from one thing to another. You're making connections. You're listening. Your ears are open. You're thinking. You're steering conversations. Like it's like everything's open. It's exhausting in the way that like scuba diving is weirdly exhausting because everything's happening at once to you. Uh, Reporting in the field is exhilarating, life affirming, provocative, but it's also exhausting because I just think everything's going on at once. You're recording, you're doing logistics, you're making sure you have what you need, you're listening, you're steering the conversation, you're trying not to embarrass yourself, all at once, all these things. I think sales is probably a little like this, maybe, but
Absolutely.
um, so
I think most importantly, you're
yeah,
completely in those times, even though it is exhausting, you are completely in the moment. And that is the
yeah,
most magical part of doing creative work, you know?
yeah. And so the reporting part, which I haven't been doing as much of, is it's a great thing to be able to do. It's a gift from the gods to have that as a job. The writing is its own pain in the ass, but being out and meeting people and being in strange situations and trying to sort your way through subcultures or political structures or social organisms is it's a blast, and it makes me feel young or it makes me feel old, both at the same time. Um, and
Dude,
I haven't done that in a little while, but every time you do it, it bears fruit for years. I mean, each project, you meet people, and sometimes you might not connect with them for 10 years, but they're still out there, and it's like I have like 40 illegitimate families.
dude, Nick Paumgarten, man, I cannot wait. Hopefully, we'll get you down here to cover the border or whatever. You come down to Zona, or I'll come to
Where
New
where
York
are you in Arizona?
in Tucson.
Oh, I'm dying to get down there.
Well, man, listen,
It's
like,
it's
may
it's
I?
like almost top of the list. I want to do a whole Albuquerque down to the border, out down to Tucson,
Hey,
uh,
man, listen,
the desert, the whole thing. Yeah.
just wait till the fall when it's not burning 110 degrees. But listen, man, it is so you made my day. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll definitely do it again, man.
Thank you for being interested in any of this. I hope I haven't just
Dude,
blathered.
this thing's gonna fly around. People are gonna be fired up to hear this, man.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Guess
People are
and
gonna listen?
I can't wait to let me know if you're gonna go back on guest of the year. Have you won a championship already? I can't
No,
tell.
no, they just had me in like the previous week to yours. I was the guest curator. So what he used a couple leftover tracks
Oh my
your
god, how could you
episode.
put a China doll with no vocals on it? I mean, it was
Oh,
insane, dude. That
that
was
thing, that's a good one, man. That's like Randy China doll.
dude, that was it didn't sound like whatever 70 said. It was so weird. And I was like, that dude, when he said who you I didn't at the time it didn't register, but I'm like,
You were
whoever
funny.
that is, I'm like, he's got some serious ears. Anyway,
I think you were like, "Fuck you, Nick Paumgarten."
no, dude, I was
And
able to strangle him. Yeah.
I was walking down the street in New York going to see a doctor, like a middle-aged man does, and you were like, "Fuck you, Nick
If I'm gonna
Paumgarten."
strangle that Nick
I was
Poundgarden,
I
dude.
was kind of laughing like Snidely Whiplash. You
All right, my man.
All
Yo,
right,
man.
take
Good to
care.
hear
Thanks
you,
for
brother.
having me on, Jake.
Be
Be
cool, man.
well. See
Yeah.
ya.
All right.
Bye.